Hello, folks. Today is Tuesday, and it is July 25th. I'm Dustin Zarni, Democratic Elections Commissioner of Onondaga County, and welcome to Commissioner in the Car. We didn't have a Commissioner in the Car last week because I was in D.C. Yes, again. This is the second time I was in D.C. on a trip this year for election-related work. It's been an interesting summer for me. I've had some great opportunities given my way. You may remember that last June, just last month, I was down in D.C. at the beginning of June for the Faces of Democracy for Issue 1. That was actually a nonpartisan private group that was bringing elections officials together from across America to go demand funding for federal government and protections for election workers. However, last week was something a little different. I was part of the Local Leadership Council, which is a commission by an advisory group by the Elections Assistance Commission. Now, the Elections Assistance Commission is actually an official federal commission. It was created in the wake of the 2020 elections. It created a HAVA, the Help America Vote Act, and it was created by the Help America Vote Act, and this is a federal commission that is uniquely looking at the election administration across America. It does a lot of different things, guidance on administering elections, certification for elections technology. And now they've brought together this group, which is the only group of its kind in the federal government, which is bringing together local elected officials from across America who administer elections for the sole purpose of discussing how to make elections better. And it was the first in-person meeting. This actually was started and funded in June of 21 after the 2020 election. Again, the Elections Assistance Commission was in place for 20 years, and in the wake of the tragedy of what was the 2000 election, and where there was a lot of breakdowns in election technology and designs of ballots and election administration. And then in 2021, they brought together this this local leadership council of the Election Assistance Commission in response to what we saw, which was the election denying and the aftermath of the 2020 election. And we were brought together for the purpose of finding ways to bring nonpartisan election administration together. Now, how this worked was the Election Assistance Commission reached out to the various associations in each state of the bodies that did elections, and that's in New York State, the New York State Elections Commission Association, and we decided that the Democratic and Republican caucus chairs would be a member of this group back in June of 2021. Now, we had no real idea what this was going to be because it was a brand new group. In fact, the group then spent about 16 months meeting virtually, deciding the mission, deciding the bylaws, and then deciding to have an in-person convention. I had very little involvement with that portion of this, so I want to make that very clear that there were other people that were guiding this. It was, again, there's 100 of us, 2 from every state, and that are part of this local leadership council, and some of the finest minds in America, election minds in America, are a part of this. So they created the bylaws, the mission, all of that, and then we voted on it at the first meeting this last week, and it was an incredible week. I went down on Tuesday night. This was paid for by the federal government, by the way, not Onondaga County taxpayer dollars. And I use my own time. I don't have vacation, so to speak, so I use it whenever I want, and I kind of consider this my own time when I was down there. and we were flown in. That was an interesting process. Just to take you behind the scenes, I wasn't sure I was going to go because I didn't know. I didn't think Onondaga County would pay for this, and I didn't know if I had my own personal funds that I could afford this with. But they said it was a federal commission, and they made the decision not to rely on local dollars, but to rely on the federal dollars to bring this group together. I think that was the right call, because so many local governments would not allow or not pay for these things, and then of course election administrators would have to decide whether they're doing it on their own. So this was important, and they're talking about having this be an annual meeting, which I found, I think that's a good thing, because these kind of things, there's nothing like getting together in person and talking with other election administrators and working with them on what are the ways to do our jobs, which is very unique. There's no college courses on it. There are some extended communities, but it's not like a wide field here. There's some, there's some crediting courses. There are some election administration courses in certain colleges, but it's not a, something that you can, go and get anywhere you want. So, it was, and so getting together with these elections officials from across the United States was amazing. In fact, there were many of them that I had spent some time with just last June. Wes Wilcox from Florida, Brianna Lemon from Missouri. They were part of the Faces of Democracy, and also came up in June and came up in July, and I didn't know that. When I walked into the room, saw them. They're good friends now. I consider them friends now, and and of course I also got to spend some time with a lot of the elections assistance commission staff and the commissioners as well. So I went down on Tuesday night. On Wednesday we had our first in-person meeting, but it was not an official meeting of the local leadership council. They had what's called the Data Summit, and the Data Summit is something that the Elections Assistance Commission does every year. After every federal election, I should say, every 2 years, they get together what's called the EAC survey. That's a survey that goes out to every political subdivision throughout America, an elections official, and we fill out the data points, and it's collected, and it tells the story of the 2022 election. And I did a little tweet thread about that when I was there. It was a 4-hour data summit, and there was a lot of incredible information, things that I found that I took back, and things that I actually have been experiencing in Onondaga County is that we saw kind of a rise in in-person voting when you talk about between 2020 and 2022. Obviously 2020 was a lot of absentee voting, but if you look at it from 2022 to 2018, which was the last midterm year, you saw a lot more people early voting and a lot more people absentee voting than we saw in 2018. Although, actually, I shouldn't say a lot more people early voting. That actually kind of stayed flat. But absentee voting and mail-in voting has risen over the last 4 years. So when you're comparing apples to apples, we are seeing a rise in mail-in ballots. They seem to be here to stay. And early voting is rising, but not that much. It stayed kind of flat. Now, a lot of that is due to restrictions on early voting put in between 2020 and 2022 in many different states. We'll have to see if that trend continues. And it'll be interesting to see what happens between 2020 and 2024 and how much difference that is going to make. So that data summit was a wealth of knowledge. We talked about how less people are using what they call provisional ballots. In New York, we call them affidavit, because in New York, we obviously have to have our own terminology for things where the rest of the country agrees on the terminology, but us in New York, we don't. So there was less provisional ballots being used nationwide. That's because there's better registration tools to make sure people are properly registered, and thus they don't have to vote provisional. And more of the provisionals were counting than they were before. So that was another data point that I found interesting. And it was just a great tool to see that data summit. Sorry, I'm a little tired today. That data summit was a great thing to watch, and I'm looking forward to later this year. There's going to be an interactive map on the EAC website where you can really dive down into these datas in an interactive way and compare your counties to other counties across the nation, across your state, compare your state to other states. It's going to be an interesting thing. So, of course, I'm going to be looking forward to that. Then on Wednesday, or that was Wednesday for the data summit. Then on Thursday, and I was really happy on Wednesday because I also ran into a good friend of mine, Hyder Garcia. I met Mr. Garcia back in 2018 when he was the Tarrant County Board of Elections Commissioner, which is Fort Worth, Texas. I have family that lives in Fort Worth, and I was caucus chair. I still am caucus chair, but in 2018 I was Democratic caucus chair, and Democrats had just taken over the New York State legislature, and they had been promising that one of the first things they were going to do when they got into session was to pass early voting. And that was a thing that I had been, in theory, very much in support of. I still am. But now we were facing the idea that we were going to have to administer it, and I never administered it before. So I was visiting Fort Worth along the Christmas holiday, and I called the Tarrant County Board of Elections and asked if I could just stop by and I only had one day I could stop by. That was New Year's Eve, and I just wanted to talk to anybody, a staffer, anybody, just to talk about early voting. And Hyder Garcia, who is the administrative head of that Board of Elections, said he would come in on his day off, and he spent all day with me, and I've never forgotten it. And what's sad about what happened to him, and he's also a member of the Faces Democracy, but now he had to leave his job as the Board of Elections administrator because a county judge was elected in Fort Worth that was basically an election denier. And he stood up for the integrity of the elections in Tarrant County, and they pretty much forced him out. So he resigned because he could not, he would not agree to some of the election denying that was going on in some of the laws that were trying to be passed in Texas in response to that election denial. So he was out of a job, but one day before the conference, he announced that he was working now with the Elections Assistance Commission, which made me so happy because I finally saw him in person for the first time in 5 years. And so we spent a lot of time together. We grabbed dinner, we talked, and caught up over the last 5 years. That was great. And it was really just great to talk to him, because I found that an influential moment in my career, was the administrating of early voting. And I was ready for that because of his generosity. So that was very important that I got to spend some time with him. Then on Thursday, we had our first meeting of the Local Leadership Council in-person meeting. We had several different things throughout that day. We had a couple of different breakout sessions. One was our regional meeting. So the Region 5, which is the Northeast, got together, and we talked about many of the different issues that all of us have in the region. A lot of it was about weather, but I think we also talked about maybe some old laws that were on the books that haven't been changed by the legislature, even though they changed other laws that affected that. So especially our old New England states were very old. We go back to the founding of the country, and a lot of our election laws sometimes go back to that too. So that was very interesting. We had a great conversation about that. Of course, there was a few presentations about what the EAC does and what the Local Leadership Council does. We also had an election, because you can't be having elections commissioners get together without an election. We had an election for leadership, the executive committee of the Local Leadership Council. I did not stand for election, didn't want it. There were some great people that I read through the bios of all the people that were seeking to get on the executive committee, and my gosh, they just very impressive people from the different states. So we had that election go on that first day. We also, adopted our bylaws, got sworn in as commissioners. So that was important. We saw that and that first whole day was really all about what the local leadership council wanted to be, because it is brand new still, even though it's 2 years old. We just formed our bylaws, we just formed our leadership, we were forming in the middle of COVID, and now we have funding from the federal government. So we talked about how we wanted to have more regional meetings throughout the year, maybe virtually, and then of course have an in-person meeting once a year as well, to continue our communication on all the things election administration. And then the next day, the final day was Friday, and there was a great presentation about how the EAC certifies equipment, and that was very interesting to me, because New York certifies its own equipment. We don't go through the EAC, but I had some chance to talk to the staffers that are involved with that, and they were very complimentary of the New York process. They said it's very much akin to what they do, just as robust, and though we don't follow the EAC process, many of the steps that we do are similar steps on our own. So that made me feel a lot better about the New York process, that they were so complimentary of that, because we're going through that right now. Some machines may be certified later next week, so we'll talk about that in next week's Commissioner in a Car, because that's going to be a big thing going ahead for me in the month of August. And then we also had other breakout sessions where we got to choose which session we went to there, and it was really hard to choose. There was election administration, there was rebuilding trust, there was election, misinformation. That's the one I chose to go to. That was an interesting panel, because man, some of these people really have it bad in their states. The lady from Nevada was talking about how her house has been targeted, that she's been, bullets are in the houses of elected officials out there, just all kinds of horrible things that I've been very lucky not to have experienced that. However, we did talk about the New York Citizens audit. I was able to spread some, I was able to talk about my experiences with that, how, that has been something that, that we've had a fight against in New York. So just because we're a big blue state doesn't mean that there's not misinformation and election denial out there. There is. And of course, we all talked about how that election denialism leads to, government making choices when it comes to election laws that they probably shouldn't make. So that was Friday, and then that was like a half day of meetings, and then we got to go on the Capitol tour. The executive meeting met. I wasn't a part of the executive committee, so I didn't attend that. But later, the Capitol tour was arranged. It was a special Capitol tour with the EAC. We got to by Amy Klobuchar's staff invited us over to the Senate wing. We got to meet in the Rules Committee meeting. We got to walk along the veranda in the Senate office building. We got to see many of the Kennedy caucus room and a lot of these big rooms, the rotunda in the Senate building. A lot of people think that when they see these live shots where people are doing live shots in the rotunda, that they're in the actual Senate or in the actual Capitol. They're not. They're actually in and the House has a rotunda as well in their buildings. That's where they have these press setups. So that was neat to see a little bit behind the scenes. And then we went on the public tour, which was a fascinating tour. There was a lot of things that I learned on that I didn't know before, like how every state gets 2 statues in Statuary Hall. and the states choose which statues to send, and it's done by popular vote, so it's been done a long time. Those statues have to remain there for 10 years, and then they can change it. And there has been some states that have like removed some of the Confederate statues that were there and changed those out. And that's got to be done by a vote. That's interesting. I also saw the crypt, which is the center of DC. There's a compass stone in the crypt, which is the center of all of Washington, DC. And it's in the center of the Capitol as well. And down in the crypt, they have 13 statues from the original 13 states. And I saw, of course, New York statue was Robert Livingston. And those of you who have followed my theatrical career know that I love the play 1776, and Robert Livingston was a part of that. I did not play him, though. Because he had to sing really well, and I can't sing really well. So that was interesting. And then, of course, there were some dark moments on this tour. The tour guides are not allowed to tell you about the insurrection or where they were invaded or any of that. They're not supposed to tell you. There were some noticeable stops along the tour where we were pointed to the door that the invasion happened, and that was first breached, and that's how people got into the Capitol. We went through Statuary Hall, which was the famous footage you see of people walking through, acting like tourists on that day when they were actually interrupting the proceedings. You kind of, for someone like me who watched that on television and watched it live, you kind of see, you see these little moments of the Capitol. So that was interesting as well. Then, of course, I flew back on Saturday morning, and I'm back in town now, and I'm back at the office. And so I just kind of wanted to recap. I did daily recaps on my Instagram Reels, but I know not a lot of people watch those or see those, because if you're not on Instagram, whatever. So I wanted to put this in the podcast. We got a lot of stuff going on at the Board of Elections this summer. It's usually supposed to be a downtime, but we're transitioning to new voting machines. I'll tell you which voting machines they are once they're certified next week. So tune in next week, and maybe you'll find out. And then we'll be revamping all our training and revamping and getting all the new machines in. It's a whole month-long process, and I'm going to kind of talk about that next week's Commissioner in the Car. What we're doing on that, and what the whole month of August is going to look like for the Board of Elections. It's going to be the busiest August in the Board of Elections since, well, we had a pretty busy August last August because we had the extra primary, the second primary there. But in 2019, it was a similar time where we were bringing in electronic poll books for the first time. This is going to be similar to that, where we're bringing in new voting machines to get ready for the general election in the middle of a year. It's very important for us to get that done this year, so we're not trying those out in the field next year. We're revamping the way we staff. We're revamping at the boards, revamping the way we do early voting. It's a lot, and we're going to be going through it all month of August. So stay tuned, and we'll also have some press events around that as well. So that's all I got for Commissioner in the Car. On Thursday, I'll be releasing my Zoom and Zarni with the manliest town Democrats. We're talking to supervisor, town justice, and town board candidates, as well as manliest town chair. A great blue town that used to be a blood red town. A great story there. I love talking to manliest because they're great. Weekly wonk. Last week I finished up my look at the primary election. This weekend I'll be talking about party changes, because that is also what happens after a primary. We roll a lot of party changes because they're on hold from February 14th till the July. And so we get a nice little look at what's happening when people change parties. Which parties are they going to? And I also am looking at the new registrations for 2023 and what parties that they're enrolling in. A lot of interesting data there. I've already started compiling it. So check out that weekly walk this weekend. Of course, go to dustinsarney.com. You can subscribe for free. You get all kinds of information, and hopefully you will like the content on there. So thank you very much, and enjoy your day. Bye-bye.